Wherever you are, whatever you're doing, stay with us as the Suns get set to shine.
Here's Perry, the guard hurt. Here's the jump shot.
Comes to Marley, a long three. He got it! He got it!
Rebound, clutched onto by Paul, and that's it. Game series. The Phoenix Suns have survived. Two great friends hug. The Suns will advance the number one seed with the best record in the NBA. But what a six-game series.
Another Sir Charles, and he flies in for a wham, bam, slam. Rebound Zubats, he loses it. Suns get it back to Rubio. Time, 6 seconds left in the game. Out to Booker, 5 seconds, 4 seconds. Booker on the drive, goes up. Here's the shot. Shoot, he got it! Woo! He got it. And the Suns win the game. Devin Booker at the buzzer puts it up and puts it in. Oh, brother!
Welcome to 7 Seconds or Less, a podcast about the Phoenix Suns. My name is Max Mccollum, and I am joined, as always, by my co-host and friend. His name is David Nash. David, after an incredibly annoying and frustrating first-round series, we are talking to each other again, which means we did actually, in fact, win it.
Thankfully, we're back, Max. That's the first note that I've got written down here. We obviously weren't going to come back for this type of episode if we didn't pull out the series, so I heard a bit of a collective sigh of relief all around the world when Game 6 ended, and I was definitely contributing to that. But I'm happy to be back and ready to go. This is an exciting one. We're back in the review/preview format, which is one of my favorite things to do with you, Max.
Yeah, me too. You came up with this concept last year of awarding our 5 stars to the 5 best players of the series once it concluded. And I love the way it kind of lays out how everything happened. It's a great way to frame the whole discussion. So very excited about that. So, of course, we'll start with that for the series against the Pelicans. We just spoke about. Then after Did You Know, we'll preview the upcoming series against David, probably the non-Sun we've spent the most time talking about on this podcast. That would be Luka Doncic and the Mavs.
I said during the week, I don't think I'm any more prepared than any other topic to discuss Mikal Bridges and Deandre Ayton guarding Luka Doncic in the pick and roll, and we will definitely get to that later, Max.
Yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun to talk about and a lot of fun to watch. But first, David, how about a recap of the aforementioned Pelican series?
Away we go in the Valley of the Sun, and Chris Paul begins it for the Phoenix Suns.
It got a little shaky, Max, but as we said, the number 1 seeded Suns defeated the 8 seed Pelicans 4-2, or technically the 10 seed Pelicans, I suppose, these days, Max. Game 1, 110-99. That feels like an eternity ago now. Chris Paul had 37 and 10. Book had 25, 4, and 8, and Ayton had a big game with 24, 9, 2, and 4 blocks in that one. They went down. Game 2, 114-125. Book, of course, had 31 points at the half, but got injured in the third quarter. And then we moved on to Game 3 without him. They pulled out the win, 114 again. This time they held the Pelicans to 111. And it was on the back of Deandre Ayton, 28-17. Paul, 28, 4, and 14, and Mikal Bridges chipped in this time with 17 points and a classic Bridges box score of 2, 2, 1, and 1 to fill that one out. They went down again, Game 4, 103-118, and that's when we all started getting a little bit nervous, but bounced back in Game 5, 112-97. Bridges breakout game, which I can't wait to talk about. 31 points, 5 rebounds, 2 assists. 1 steal and 4 blocks in that one. Chris Paul, 22, 6, 11, and Ayton had 19 and 9 in that one as well. Closed it out, Game 6 in New Orleans, 115-109. Chris Paul did not miss a shot, 33, 5, and 8. Ayton, 22, 7, and 4. Bridges, another classic line from him, 18, 3, 2, and 2. But Max, before I round out the rest of the recap here, let's throw to a question like I like to do.
Okay.
Scale of 1 to 10. How high did the stress ever get for you in this series that we might not be able to pull it out?
Man, that's a really good question. I think it's pretty high, man. Probably 8.5, 9. I thought there was a real chance there, if Booker never ended up returning, and just the way they were killing us on the boards. It was really getting dicey there. I'll settle on an 8 because we had the talent advantage. Ultimately, we needed to win that series, but yeah, it was a little dicey, man.
I agree. I was going to say 7 or 8. I think it definitely, after Game 4, got to a point. I kind of, some people tweet through it.
Yeah.
I kind of go back and watch film. Mm-hmm. And I've got to say, I definitely felt better after watching the losses. I just felt like some of the stuff that the Pelicans were getting was unsustainable. But you never know. The longer those series go on, Max, we were down to a 3-game series, basically, and anything can happen.
Well, especially with the way Brandon Ingram was playing, which if other opposing players were eligible for stars, he would be on the 5-star list for sure.
Yeah, I did consider it, considering... we are going to be struggling for 2 and 1 stars at the end here. But health was the big reason, I suppose. We've still got Dario out with that ACL. Obviously, he's been a mainstay on these injury reports for a long time now. But Booker, you mentioned it, the hamstring there. He did come back for Game 6. I noticed just before we jumped on the mics, the Suns got fined $25,000 for not being honest about that. And Chris Paul with a bit of a left-hand finger thing. He says he's healthy. Monty says he's healthy, but they also said that all through last playoffs, Max. So are you worried about that at all? What did you see with Chris?
I don't know, man. As long as he's going 14 for 14 in closeout games, I can't be too worried about it. So on the worst scale for now, I'm going to stay around a 2 or a 3 on that one.
Yeah.
And I do want to add, I don't know if you saw this before we got on, but Booker tweeted about the fine.
Oh, really?
He tweeted at Suns, I'll split it, or something around that, like that.
Very nice. I'm sure he can afford to.
I think largely because it may have been because he said I'm back after Game 5 screamed it. But maybe part of the reason why that happened.
Yeah, he kind of threw him under the bus a little bit there. But we're going to get into it later. But just to round out the recap here, schedule round 2 versus the Mavs. They beat Utah 4-2. It starts Monday, your time, and Tuesday, my time here in Australia, which I'm sure some of our listeners are in the same time zone as me. Game 2 Wednesday and Game 3 Friday, Max, and I can't wait.
I can't wait either. This is going to be... I'm really glad we got into this series, not just because we didn't lose, but also because I think this is just going to be so much more of a fun series than what we just experienced.
Yep.
But we have to give out our 5 stars on this series, David, so let's go ahead and start with that.
6 on the shot clock. Paul on the drive with a pullback. Gets the roll, and he remains perfect on the night.
I don't think there's going to be a lot of suspense for the 5-star player. I think, in fact, we already tweeted about it a little bit, so no one's going to be surprised. I think, as soon as 4 and 3-star, it might get a little more interesting.
Yes.
But for 5-star, it is not, and it is Chris Paul, who averaged 22 points per game, 4 rebounds per game, 11 assists per game, 1.8 steals per game, 1.5 turnovers. He shot 57 from the field, 31 from 3, a little pedestrian there, but 96 from the free throw line, and 66 true shooting. He led in plus-minus, David, pretty easily. He also, my favorite stat, had the most free throws per game of the team with 4.2. David, he was just sensational.
Yeah, I'm not sure what else to say. I think, as you just alluded to, we're going to have some possible debate on some of the next stars coming up. But, when Book went down, I knew we needed it, but I just had no idea if he had it. We'd seen it as soon as, I guess, last playoffs, but I think we'd commented in the lead-up in one of the podcasts that we did. We didn't really see it this year. Chris was pretty pedestrian, as you said before, to describe something else. And, I didn't know whether he had it. I knew we were going to need it. I'm just coming off the back of doing a big video breakdown talking about pigeons. So if anyone listening hasn't seen that and wants to marvel in Chris Paul's just brilliance through this series, definitely go and watch that video. But here's one for you, Max. I tweeted about this earlier. His Q4 stats in the 4 wins. You've just got to get 4 wins.
Okay.
He played 45 minutes, Max, in the 4 fourth quarters in this series. He had 54 points. He shot 77% from the field, 43 from 3, and 92 from the free throw line. He had 9 assists and 10 rebounds as well. Here's the one. 77% is just ridiculous off the bat. But when you dig a little deeper, he missed a total of 2 shots from inside the 3-point line. in fourth quarters in the 4 wins. And as I said, you've just got to... He had a quiet game in one of those losses, but it doesn't matter at the end of the day, Max. You've just got to get those 4 wins, and he was unbelievable.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it felt like it. I got to say, the stats you're saying, like, as absurd as those stats are, like, you know, that's what it felt like Washington. He was transcendent. You expected every single one of those jumpers to go in. I mean, it's been repeated ad nauseum, but the touch he puts it up there with, it's hard for it not to go.
Some of the rolls.
Yeah, it's hard for it not to go in, right? As long as it gets in the vicinity, like the touch is so light, it's just going to like drop in.
That last one, I think it was, where Booker swung him the ball from the left-hand side and he attacked Alvarado on the closeout. And it bounced like 4 feet in the air off the front of the rim, hit the back of the rim, and still bounced in for 14 of 14. He is just unbelievable.
There's like no other player in the league who makes that particular shot the way it went, you know?
No.
It was absurd. And I think I love what you bringing up, the fact that, you know, we didn't totally know if he could do it or not. Of course, we still know Chris Paul's awesome. He had awesome stats this year, all that stuff, but there's not many players in the NBA, if any, who can go 14 for 14 in a closeout game and then do what you just said on all the 4 quarters of the 4 wins. Like that's rarefied air in NBA history. There's not a lot of guys who can do that. So just to say that we weren't sure he can do it is not to slight him at all. It's not sure that many guys can do that. And the fact that we're seeing him at that level, I think Bill Simmons said something interesting. He said he thinks he's playing at the highest offensive level he's ever played in his career at this age. And I think that's possible. I mean, the way he's just dominating the game, the way as soon as he needs to, you know, in the closing winning time, especially in games 3 and 6, he just spammed the MIDI button. It was unstoppable. He knew he had it, and Pelicans couldn't do anything about it. And he was the only reason we were able to pull those games out. And you know, we don't win this series, I don't think, if he doesn't go supernova like that.
Yeah, it's a great point. And the one that I'm glad that you mentioned right up the top was that 1.5 turnovers for the series when he averaged 11.3 assists. Like, that's just ridiculous stuff. And I was kind of debating this internally with myself. I haven't heard Bill Simmons talk about it, but it's an interesting point. And, you know, I think there is definitely an argument there. And, you know, I would look at it kind of like, you know, a seesaw here where, you know, early on in his Pelicans or Hornets days, his athleticism was the best that it's ever been.
Yep.
And he's always been a cerebral point guard, but his kind of reading of the game was probably as low as it's ever been while his athleticism was at that peak. And, you know, I guess you could argue around his Clippers days is when that seesaw perfectly balanced out, where the athleticism and the mental side of the game were on kind of level playing field, and it's kind of swung back the other way here at 37, where, you know, you don't see him get up for some of those dunks and stuff that he used to when he was much younger in the NBA. But for a player like him that's always had athletic limitations and that has, you know, been 5'13" his whole career, I would argue that the mental side and everything that he's picked up and how much he can work his way through a game is probably more important than the athleticism that he once had when he was younger. And yeah, it's hard to argue when he's playing with this kind of efficiency. You know, you sort his career stats on Basketball Reference, and some of the things he's doing in these seasons with the Suns and these playoff series are things that he's basically never done before in the NBA, which is just wild when he's about to turn 37, Max.
Yeah, you know, maybe the way to put it would be like in the regular season to carry a team, he's clearly not what he was in his prime.
Yeah.
He just doesn't have the body, he doesn't have the athleticism anymore. But in a fourth quarter, if you're trying to close out a playoff game, and you know, in the 16-game season, as Draymond Green likes to call it, I think that you wouldn't want any other version of Chris Paul. I don't want to import Clippers or Pelicans or I guess Hornets Chris Paul into this series. I'm very happy with the Chris Paul that we have right now, the one who just went 14 for 14 in a playoff closeout game on the road. I think that speaks for itself, right? That is a transcendent performance by a transcendent legendary player.
And definitely not Rockets Chris Paul, Max.
Yeah, right. not the one who's hurt in the key games. Let's knock on wood not have that one this year. How about that?
I got to do it too, just to be safe.
Yes, everyone's listening. Please also knock on wood for that one. All right. Do you have anything else on Chris Paul, or do you want to move to? The one last thing I'll touch on just real quick is I mentioned the 1.8 steals per game, but the fact that he can still play very high quality defense at his age because of how smart he is ridiculous. Somebody his size and his age should be playing for the Utah Jazz with their ability on defense. with that, so that part's crazy.
Teams go at him too. I think we talked about this on a recent podcast. It's kind of a pride thing for him now. He takes it. It gets under his skin. Teams can definitely do some things with him that become a bit of a weakness for our team defense. But he stands up in the moments that really count. But let's move on, because this next two, if I'm reading the room right here, is really, really close. And I'm very interested to see whether we do our normal thing of being on the same side of the ledger or go opposite sides here, Max.
Man, I went back and forth on this, and there's a good chance one of us talks the other into the other if we choose oppositely.
Yeah.
But just because, if the whole series Mccollum had played the way he played in games 5 and 6, it would clearly be him. But I think just because of the consistency, because he was so good the whole time, because he was invaluable to our biggest early road win in Game 3. And also, again, he was great offensively in games. I think to me, it has to be Deandre Ayton, David.
We're on the same side, Max.
Okay.
Believe it or not.
Again, it was so close. This was so hard. I don't think there's a right answer here. Deandre Ayton.
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I labored over this one a lot, probably more than I did with anything for this whole podcast. And we can get into the reasons why, but you're probably going to rattle off his stats here, which I think we should do to show how ridiculous he was, Max.
Yep, let's start there. So 21 points per game in this series, 10 rebounds, 2.5 assists, 0.7 steals, 1.2 blocks, 1.2 turnovers, 70% from the field, 50% from three, because he had a three, 75% free throw, and 72% true shooting. So obviously ridiculous offensive efficiency. The other stat I want to note, and then I'll let you weigh in, I just love how he continued what he did last year in the playoffs. The defense without fouling, only 3.2 fouls per game.
Yep.
Love him staying on the floor like that.
Yeah, go watch Jaren Jackson Jr. and you will appreciate DeAndre Ayton's ability to stay on the floor a hell of a lot more. But yeah, as I said, I kind of had to get into the weeds to separate these two guys, and this is where I landed. He was plus 24 for the series, which was second on the team behind only Chris Paul. And then I just debated who was more important, and I landed on Ayton, not purely for this, but you think about Book going down. One of the main things they have to replace, not only just Book's offensive output in total and everything that runs behind him, but as we know, Chris Paul times his runs for those fourth quarter runs, and Devin Booker plays the entire first quarter in Monty's normal rotation. So how do you replace a guy like that? And in 55 first quarter minutes, Max, Ayton had 51 points, 16 rebounds, and 2 blocks. He went 24 of 28 from the field in first quarters. He was the first quarter guy, and that was probably the biggest worry. Once Chris Paul was showing he could take care of landing the plane at the end of the game, how were we going to, get into our offense to start games when Pelicans were coming out and throwing haymakers at us? And he just showed up. It was crazy to watch. And you mentioned 16 game players before from Draymond Green. I think that's a great way to look at DeAndre Ayton now in the playoffs, because I'm not sure that there's a player that I've seen in recent times that's more of a 16 game player than DeAndre Ayton. We've talked at length about how he loves the national attention, the big TV games, the ones, the matchups that he knows everybody's waiting for and seems to always show up. We finally got to see it in the playoffs last year. It wasn't a hypothetical anymore, and he was very impressive. But more than that, I keep thinking about this series and how much he, as the series went on, put the ball on the floor and attacked Nance and JaVale. We don't see DeAndre Ayton do that. It's probably been the biggest thing that Suns fans have been hoping for DeAndre Ayton to do. And I really think, and this is something that I've been on from day one with Ayton, because he looked really confident against guys he'd played in college, Marvin Bagley, Jaren Jackson, Mo Bamba, guys that he'd been to training camps with and knew their tendencies. Yep. He was great from day one with those guys. And then, as we've noted, as we've done this podcast, the more he's played Jokic, the more he's played a Steven Adams, the more he's seen those guys, he gets more and more confident. And that's exactly what he did in the 6 games of this series. He started to see, these guys can't guard me. I'm putting the ball on the floor and getting to the rack. And that was just amazing to see. And it just made me think of how much he is a playoff guy who can feel his way through a series and kind of process things and find the weaknesses of the guys that are guarding him, which is amazing.
Yeah, that's a really great way to put it. I hadn't thought of it that way before. The fact that, you have that 7 games of scouting, that whole thing, it actually benefits him a lot because of the familiarity thing. And also the other end of that is he can't be figured out, really. You can't play him off the floor over, of course, a 7-game series. He's unplayoffable. Not able to play in the playoffs, but unplayable off the floor. And I think that's so key to why he's a 16-game player. And I totally agree. We have the evidence now, right? He got way better last postseason from the regular season last year. And this season, he was better this season, so there wasn't as much room to jump up. But I think he jumped up even more, especially offensively. Last year, his early in the playoffs and throughout the whole thing, but particularly early, his efficiency was it was ridiculous. Right? It was historic. He had the best efficiency ever. But a lot of that was finishing around the rim set up to him and stuff like that. This time, he was just making every single long two he took, basically. It was unbelievable the shots he was making, and especially in games 3 and 6. Game 6, in the first half, every single shot he was taking from around the free throw line or further back, he was just making every single time. And those shots are, as Chris Paul and Devin Booker have shown us repeatedly over the last 2 years, having somebody who can make those shots, it's invaluable. And the fact that Ayton and the guy we'll get to in a second here are also making those shots now, it makes the Suns such a good playoff offense, because those are the shots that you are going to be forced into. They're the shots that, as we'll get to later, the Mavs force people into.
Yep.
And I think that it's going to be a huge boon to us if Ayton keeps up that shooting, and I'm confident that he will. It's hard to have any sort of doubt in him in the playoffs at this point. The sample size has grown large.
It has. I guess the only thing would be if teams start playing up on him a little bit more, but he's shown the flashes of being willing to attack off the dribble now as well. It's still, dribbled into some traffic with, guys like Jose Alvarado, biting at his ankles and things, but he still managed to look pretty good. The passing flashing, I think, was really good as well. He had, he had 2.5 assists to 1.2 turnovers, so 2-to-1 ratio there, which isn't bad for a big, but some of the passes out of the short roll and stuff were really, really impressive from him. And I think that's why I landed on him at 4 with that shot making. Where do the Suns go in early game situations if he's not making those shots? And I think things would have looked a lot tougher on Chris Paul, for instance, and who knows whether then he could pull things out at the other end of the game for us. So he was just huge. There's no question for me, Max. He's a max guy.
Yes.
I think we agreed on this last offseason just in terms of the position that the Suns were in, that they should be offering the max. They didn't do it. And kind of, I guess, quite rightly said publicly that they kind of needed to see more. I've seen everything I need to. If you're not maxing a guy that is doing this and you already picked him number 1, I'm just not sure what you're thinking, to be perfectly honest, Max.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Last season you could use the justification that they'd only really seen it for that playoff run, and maybe that was all for the contract, and maybe it wasn't real.
Yeah.
But then he played a much better regular season this year than he did previously, and then he's doing this again in the playoffs. I think there's no question anymore. In fact, as wonderful as he was in the playoffs last year, I don't want to step on him last year. I think this was probably his best playoff series, just the shot making and how much we desperately needed him to do it. Maybe the Jokic thing was more impressive, but it's damn close. I love that you brought up the passing too. There was one, he didn't get credit for this. It doesn't show up in the stats, but there was an amazing pass he had in Game 6 to Mccollum, who blew the layup. Just an unbelievable pass for somebody his size. And the more he can develop that stuff, the more he's going to even more firmly establish himself as somebody who needs the max.
Yep. Should we do 3 and the guy you just mentioned there, Max, I think?
Yes, despite his blown layup, he is going to finish number 3 here. He has 17 points per game for the series, 5 rebounds, 2.7 assists, 0.8 steals, 1.5 blocks, only 1.3 turnovers. His efficiency was great, 55% from the field, 53% from 3, 91% from the line, a 66% true shooting. He averaged 41.8 minutes a game, and he only had 2.5 fouls a game despite guarding the 2 best scorers on the Pelicans constantly. David, he was just a menace, especially defensively.
He was. He's a ridiculous one for you, Max. He played 30 more minutes than anyone else on the Suns in this series.
Oh, wow. That is insane. That is crazy. That's what happens when Booker goes out, right?
Exactly. I think if you're trying to make the argument for Mccollum as 4 stars here, which I'm sure some people listening would like to make, he was the 3rd leading scorer but it all comes down to that defense. And primarily CJ McCollum's stats for the series, 22.2 points. He shot 39% from the field, 33% from three on 8.5 attempts, and 69% from the free throw line, which Mccollum obviously doesn't have a lot to do with. He only had 4.8 assists to 2.5 turnovers. If some of those things, particularly the threes, and the assists are much better than where they ended up, I think this becomes an even closer series than it already was, and I think Mccollum deserves all the credit for that. I was going to ask you this question if you went him 4 stars, but I'll ask it to everyone listening who would prefer to pick Mikal Bridges over Deandre Ayton. Do you go with Mccollum's defense with his added offense, or Ayton's offense that we just gushed about with his added defense? What could you, I guess, afford to take out of the team? And I just lent Ayton, as I said, but it was only by a whisker, Max.
It's so damn close. I think the primary reason I went with Ayton is because Mccollum's offense really kind of disappeared and hurt us quite a bit, especially in those road games early on. But I think the best argument for him is probably that his Game 5 was the second best game my son played all series. And it was the best game until Chris Paul had a perfect Game 6. So it's also his best game, the best game that he has played in his career. And it would have been the best game he played all last playoffs, I think, even better than the 27 points of the finals. It was an insane basketball game played by a player. He wrecked the game. And if that game ended up being closer, maybe we would feel more like, oh my God, Mccollum saved our bacon there. We ended up winning relatively comfortably. But man, the reason we won that game primarily was Mccollum Bridges' brilliance in it.
Yeah, and I think as we get to the last few stars here, you maybe start to lean more kind of peak of the series to give stars away to certain guys. But I wouldn't argue against anyone who wants to argue that he had the second best game in the series and then all the consistent play after that. So you can argue it. But, I guess the last things I would touch on him for here is not a huge volume, but it was really good to see his 3-point percentage bounce back. Shot over 50% from 3 in this series. Pretty much one of the only Suns to do well, which we'll get into a little bit later. He led the team in blocks with 9. He was second in assists with 16. He was second in rebounds in 27. Second in free throw attempts at 22. First in deflections at 2.5, and second behind Deandre Ayton in contested shots at 7.8. When I wrote all of those down, I nearly flipped because he was the next best guy in almost every key category across the board, and that just shows to his consistency in the series, I think, Max.
Yeah, totally agree. I think it's kind of an impossible choice, to be honest. Yep. It'd be nice to give them both 3.5 stars or whatever. But,
I thought about it, but we didn't have that in, bent into the rules, so I didn't go there.
Me neither. All right, Dave, it's time for this. This is as hard as pick between Ayton and Mccollum is. Picking 2 and 1 star, or maybe even harder for a different reason.
I have no idea where you are going with this, Max.
I don't know where you're going with this either. I think to me there were 3 options sort of here.
Yep.
Do you want me to go first? Or you want to go first?
You go. You take the honors.
I went with somebody who didn't play very much in the series, and I went with Devin Booker.
We had similar thinking. We will get to him next for me, or we may as well talk about him now, actually. But I've got them in a potentially different order, although I don't know who you're going to say last. But yeah, let's talk Devin Booker, because I think he's the beneficiary of everyone else being not great in this series, to be honest, to be able to get 2 or 1 star from me and you respectively. But why did you go him 2, Max?
Well, it's a couple of reasons. One, his numbers, even though he didn't play very much, were really good. He actually led in points per game despite leaving the game in Game 2 and being a little limited in Game 6. 23 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, 1.7 turnovers on 50% field goal, 48% from 3, 88% from the line, good for a 65% true shooting. So excellent numbers. He just didn't play very much. And the thing that really pushed him over the top for me is that he had the most meaningful, important shot of the whole series when he made that 3 when we were down 1 point with about a minute 40 to go. That was the game was almost over. And if he doesn't make that, we probably are playing Game 7 tonight. David, that was a massive, massive shot, the biggest shot of the series, like I said. And so to me, because of that, and also because I'm biased, and I was at the game for Game 2 first half when he had 31 points right in front of me, and just was that was the best half a Sun probably played besides Chris Paul's fourth quarters. Just unbelievable, and that's what it did for me. It was peak over the fact that it just the other guys didn't play very well.
Yeah, I went the 1 star because we're looking at, I guess, 2.5 games in a 6-game series. But the reason I gave him 1 and why I won't begrudge you for giving 2, and I forgot we're on an audio podcast here for a second because I was just sitting there nodding my head at all of your points, not realizing that no one can see what I'm doing. But you touched on everything that I'd written down. I went peaks here over other guys. So 25, 4 and 8 in the game 1 win, 31 points in the half at game 2, and who knows what happens if he doesn't get injured in that game. And then a huge boost, and as you said, a huge shot in game 6. So that's why I gave him the 1 star over everybody else on the Suns roster. But question for you, what percentage do you think he's at? And I'll let you pick either what you saw in game 6 or where you think he'll be with a few more days rest in game 1 versus Dallas, Max.
Yeah, it's a really damn hard question. I think it's probably going to go a little higher than people would expect, because I think largely the way he looked limited was less about his health status, more about just ingratiating yourself back in a game 6 of a series.
Yeah.
So I would say he's probably like 90-ish, and I'm hopeful he'll be at 100 by game 1, but I think it'll be pretty close to that. And I expect him to be at 100 early in the series, I'll say.
Yeah, I hope so. And I think it's pretty key before we get into that series a bit later. I think him being close to 100 is key to the Suns being able to pull the second round out. But we can talk about that a little bit later. So, 2 stars for me. And
one second.
Yep.
I have one more small Booker thing. It's a soft thing. It's a soft factor.
Go for it.
I think it really, really does matter how much passion he shows while he's out. You can compare him to other stars who had to leave series for injury and are just checked out of the whole thing.
Yeah.
And they're thinking about Cabo or whatever.
Yeah.
His leadership, his emotional leadership was amazing, what he was doing. I mean, he took it a little close to the brink a few times, some of the things he was doing. But I loved it. I think that you can't ask for more out of your star. And that did factor in a little bit to why I put him 2.
I'm glad you threw that in, actually, because the amount of times I saw him, showing Deandre Ayton where he should be on defensive coverage, or debating with Chris Paul what he's seeing out there and kind of feeding that to him. I think that's a good point. He found a way to still be involved in the series even when he was sitting on the bench.
Yep. All right. Let's hear your 2 and let's see if it's my 1.
I went Cam Johnson.
Yep, that is my 1.
All right, 11 points per game, 46, 35, 67 from the free throw line, which isn't great. 3.7 rebounds, 1.5 assists to 1 turnover, and 0.5 of a block in this series. He had to pinch hit as a starter. Ultimately, he was good in games 1 and 6, which were both wins for the Suns and brought what the team very much needed in those ones. Question for you, Max.
Yep.
Who led the Suns in 3-point makes for the series?
You're bringing it up here, so I guess it was either Booker or him, I guess. I'm going to go with Cam Johnson.
It was Devin Booker, which is hilarious to me.
I mean, it helps when you make 8 in the first half of a game, right?
He had 12. Cam had 10, which is why I ask it in this section. So he was second best. And Mccollum and Chris Paul had 8 each. So I think he's trending the right way because... it's lucky. Here's the others. Paul 31%, as we mentioned at the top. Jay 11% from 3 in this series. Payne 17, Shamet 21, Torrey Craig 25%. So even though you look at it, 35% from Cam Johnson, not great relative to everybody else and how much they needed some of those threes that he hit in key situations. It was enough for me with those 11 points per game to say, I think you were the 4th best guy for the Suns in this series.
Yeah, and you made a good point there with the way he's trending. That's the reason why I thought he was I thought he deserved a star and not an honorable mention, is because the later games of the series matter more, and he got better as it went along. You pointed out how well he played in Game 6. Game 5 also didn't shoot well from 3, 1 for 5, but he had 9 rebounds and 5 assists, which I think is really, really helpful. When you get that extra playmaking out of the wing like that, helps a lot. I thought he was very good in that game. He seemed to gain his confidence as he went along. Finally went 2 for 3 from 3 in Game 6. It was really tough to watch him at times early in the series on the road in New Orleans. He had a couple air ball threes at some point. But the other thing I'll point out is he was second in fast break points per 36 behind Devin Booker, which is a nice contribution that he makes. He made the playoffs last year. He always makes it. it's key to get those 3 points when you can get them in playoffs. They're hard to come by.
There was that key kind of, what's becoming a bit of a trademark of his dunk, kind of in the, semi-transition where they almost look like a set play. I thought it was something they probably did in walkthrough in the morning before the game, because Chris Paul kind of walked away, took Herb Jones out of the action. Deandre Ayton set a screen at the halfway line on Ingram to get Cam free, and there was just no one at the bucket, so he just kept going and dunked it like we see him, I joke all the time, he has kind of won a surprise dunk a game almost, it seems, at the moment, Max.
Yeah, and those plays really matter. He tends to do them at really meaningful times, it seems
sure.
like, when he does that stuff.
Yep.
I think, and you know what, I think the best thing about this is, he's 1 star in this series, but it would not shock me to see him get a 3 or a 4 in a series going forward. He really did seem to come on a little bit. His offense is it may be the thing that can put us over the top in some of these series, because not a lot of teams have players that like him that can come off the bench and really just win you a game.
Completely agree.
All right, I had one honorable mention, David. Did you have any?
I didn't, because it was just so poor at 2 and 1 stars. I didn't really even feel like anyone, was worth mentioning. I let me see who you throw in before I have maybe something extra to say.
Yeah, I don't think it'll surprise you, and I think maybe before Game 6 he could have possibly been the 1 star. It's JaVale McGee.
Yep.
Who just didn't play in Game 6. I think defensively he struggled a lot, but offensively he was quite good. 11 points per game, 4 rebounds on 81% field goal, 80% free throw, and 82% true shooting. He was fairly unstoppable in some of those games around the basket. But again, he got kind of played out off the floor. He wasn't hurt, right, David? I assume he was played off the floor.
Yeah, I think it was a good choice by Monty in the end, but it's really hard when a guy's being that efficient on offense to actually make the choice to bench him. But I just thought that they were doing what I thought they might in terms of, trying to play him off the floor. He's just not as versatile on defense as a guy like Deandre Ayton, so it's tough. But yeah, there was definitely one stretch in at least one game where he was kind of keeping us afloat with what he was doing with the reserves, and it's definitely worth giving him a mention for that. I was just going to throw Jay Crowder in purely because I know he was probably the kicking or the punching bag, I should say, for this series for Suns fans, mainly because he was missing almost every shot that he took. But he just does so many little things, and I just don't think that it shows up often even on the box score, and when he's missing shots like that, I think people focus on that too much. I'm not going to defend him. I think he needs to be much, much better for the Suns to keep going through the playoffs here. But yeah, if I was going to give an honorable mention, it would just be all the little things that he manages to do out on the court that often go unnoticed.
Yeah, the on-off stuff with him was actually pretty great.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's largely because of him or not, but it was. The thing with Jay is, I said this a few times on Twitter because I think it's the thing with him is like, you can get over the missed 3-pointers. It happens.
Yeah.
He's going to be streaky that way, but he just has to be more judicious with the shots he takes.
100%.
He takes some really bad shots, and that's the big. If I'm Monty, that's the thing I'm in his ear about. It's like, you just cut that crap out. If you miss threes, it's fine, but you can't take the obviously contested ones. You can't take the long twos. Just got to cut all that crap out. It's not going to fly, especially as we get a little later in the playoffs. Anything else in the star segment, David? Or we have some mini things we want to do before Did You Know?
Yeah, let's go to brag check segment, yes. Max.
Brag check. We're going to quickly do a couple things that we each got right because we feel pretty good about a couple things in this series. I'll start with a real quick non-Suns one, David. I did believe I said that I could see Boston sweeping in the series in the last podcast, and they certainly they did.
You did say that. You deserve all the credit in the world, even though it was probably the closest sweep in NBA history.
That is true.
And there was a buzzer beater in there, so you really.
Yeah, I did not feel so smart after Game 1, David.
You really towed the line as close as you could with that prediction, but. I just didn't see it. I thought that with the talent of Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving, they'd at least pick up a game to prove you wrong. But you got that one right, so you deserve.
It was hard to foresee Kevin Durant and Brandon Ingram switching bodies before the series.
Yes, and we will definitely get into him in a little bit. But I guess off the top, I would say the two things that in our main segment that I said that I was looking forward to for the playoffs as a whole, and we got a taste of them very quickly, were how Chris Paul and the Suns were going to adjust to ball pressure in a whole 7-game series.
Yeah.
And we saw it a lot,
Yes.
probably more than I really anticipated this early on. I was more mentioning that as something that we were going to see as the series hopefully went on throughout the playoffs. But I guess with Booker's injury and the only way that the Pelicans had a chance of getting into the series, they showed it super, super early. I guess, question for you, how do you balance out the Suns, I guess, showing everyone early in the playoffs what their adjustments are versus getting the reps in it? And, what do you see as probably more important with that coming out so much in the first series, Max?
Very good question. I think it depends on what exactly we're talking about, like what strategic move we're talking about. I think this particular one, because it's so much about preserving Chris Paul, I think it makes a lot of sense. And also, it's not like something, sure, you can scout for it, but like we can't really do much about them just taking the ball from somebody else, right?
That's fair.
It's just going to happen. So I think this particular one, it makes a lot of sense to do it early. And I loved it, except sometimes I thought that it would result in Jay Crowder having the ball way too long. And that was a little concerning, but yeah, overall I think it's the only move, and it's a great adjustment and a great call by you.
A little more Bridges, Booker, and Cam Johnson than Jay Crowder, please. But
agree.
The other one, seeing Deandre Ayton, the max player, I don't need to say anymore because we already raved about his series, but I said that one was something that I was really looking forward to. And then we had the old, new, bold, and blue. I'm not sure how well you went with those ones, Max, but I was, I got some things wrong, but I was pretty happy with my performance there.
Okay, I don't even remember what I said. The Boston was one of those for me.
Yeah.
The one I'll say before I let you get to the other ones, real quick, this is not like a genius move, and everybody freaking knew this, but we saw offensive rebounding be a problem going into the series, and boy, oh boy, was it a problem, David. It was really the only reason why the Pelicans were winning stretches against us.
Yeah, I think we both touched on the bigs at some point in those predictions, but I had for old Mccollum as the key offensive cog. We saw that one big game, but I think, keen to see what it looks like with Book back, where he's more the third guy than someone having to be the second. Basically saw none of Point Book because of his injury, so we're robbed of that one, but that's a bit of a TBC to look out for. Cam Johnson did start, but not over Jay Crowder, as I predicted, Max, but I could maybe still see it happening if Jay Crowder keeps shooting the way that he is. So that's one to keep watching for long after the Pelicans series as well, Max. But did you have any other observations? We mentioned Ingram there. I feel like we both got that wrong. I feel like that's worth touching on potentially. Yeah,
he was much better than I think either of us thought he was. I still think as soon as you turn him into having to make plays and pass, it really hampers his game.
Yeah.
But I mean, the shot making is absurd. There's really nothing you can do about it. There were times where Mccollum was playing as good a defense as possible to play on a guy, and he was, like we said earlier, turning into Durant, doing the thing where he just takes a turnaround jump shot with his length. It's unguardable, and he was making them more often than not. He was tremendous.
Yeah, they started to do something right at the very end with him, which I thought really worked, and throw kind of an extra body in front of him early. I think we've talked about this before, like a pre-rotation. A guy like Draymond Green is really great at this. Like, he rotates before the play even happens based on what he thinks is going to happen. And there was a couple there where they threw a guy in at the restricted area, and that just made Ingram think earlier about what he was going to do next. And that's when he got himself a little bit stuck sometimes. But the kind of initial playmaking was really good. I feel like we undersold him on even that aspect of his game. 27, 6 and 6 on 47, 41, 83. Like, he was, as good as anyone in this series, I thought. And looking back, I think he was, other than Larry Nance, I think he was the only kind of regular rotation guy that had a positive plus minus in the series. He just far and away their best player in this one, which I thought was worth noting. Willie Green, obviously the other thing worth noting here. We said it, he knew our guys. I think we even said it might be good to go through that test early. I don't think when we said that we were quite thinking that it would maybe get as stressful as what it did, but obviously Booker's injury kind of did that to the series. But do you still agree with that? Like a good thing to go through in the first round here that we can look back on in hindsight now that we pulled it out, Max?
I do. I think overall, yes. I mean, obviously you don't want Booker to get hurt. That was not a good thing, and hopefully he's 100% back from it soon. But definitely, you were dead on with saying that Willie would point out some of this stuff, and I think it was really important. I think the way they played Chris Paul, I think it is going to keep going on in the playoffs. Alvarado in particular. I mean, as annoying as that guy is, I don't like that guy. I just hate him. He was so annoying. But he's a gamer, man. He's going to have a long career. He's a damn good player. He was really – and there were multiple fourth quarters where he was just making these shots where I was like, I cannot believe Jose freaking Alvarado is making these shots against us. It's impressive.
You love to see stories like that. I think that's one of the great things about the NBA when you see those guys. And I think we have to touch on it. Did you see Chris Paul seemingly – incorrectly pronouncing his name, in the Game 6 press conference?
I absolutely did see that, and yes, that was not unintentional. That was intentional.
The best thing, go back and watch it for anyone listening if you've seen it before or haven't seen it. Devin Booker really has a hard time holding back his smirk as Chris Paul is doing that.
In fact, it's so obvious that he's trying not to laugh that it almost looks like he's trying to show that he's not trying to laugh. That's how obvious it is. It's really funny. I have one more Pelicans thing. And do you have anything else?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on the 3-point percentage. You already touched at length about the offensive rebounds. I think teams are going to look at that and think that that's a way to get under the Suns' skin. I don't think the next matchup is going to be a problem on that end. And then the fouls, I think, for all Monty's comments, and that's just a coach playing the game. I don't understand why people get so up in arms about that. Like, we see it almost every series. The Suns got almost bang on 19.8 free throw attempts in the series, and we averaged 19.9 during the regular season. But the Pels got 28.8 when we averaged during the season, giving away 22.7. So whether it was refs or just the physicality that they brought, we definitely fouled more than we had in the regular season, and they just need to watch that match.
Agree. I think the reffing was more kind of just annoying on both sides than I thought it was biased or anything like that.
Agreed.
For a lot of it, the reason why they were going to the line we weren't is because they were attacking and we weren't. You cannot get free throws if you don't attack. That's just how it works.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess my last thing I want to talk about the Pelicans is just that it's going to be it's a good problem to have, but it's going to be really hard for them to integrate Zion to what they're doing this next season. If what they did in this series is any indication of what they plan on doing in the future, it's just what Zion does, and like with Valanciunas and all that, it's going to be really weird and kind of fascinating to see how Willie Green, who acquitted himself miraculously in this series, I think Monty probably had a little too much criticism. I think Willie Green still definitely outcoached him in this series. I think it's fair to say. And so I'm excited to see how he does it. But yeah, I think it's going to be tough to integrate Zion on that team.
Yeah, I think CJ will be the main beneficiary, not having to be run the team. You're going to run a lot of stuff through Zion. Ingram, I can't remember who I was listening to the other day, maybe on the Zach Lowe podcast, where a guest kind of alluded to the fact that Ingram wasn't great with Zion on the floor because of their games not really matching up together. I think it's easy to go, well, they were starting Jackson Hayes, so you put Zion in there, and of course it's going to be even better. But that's kind of, missing the point a little bit that Jackson Hayes, basically doesn't touch the ball on offense unless he's the last option, whereas Zion's going to plug in and basically be the first option. So, yeah, there's definitely some stuff to work out there for them. But I'm just so high on them. I've had an affinity because they run the same stuff as the Suns. So when I watch them, I can kind of pick out some of that stuff. And I just think, the Suns' dangerous structure around all the elbow stuff that they do, the Spain pick and roll stuff, when you start to imagine that, I guess instead of Chris Paul, Devin Booker, and Deandre Ayton, that is CJ McCollum, Brandon Ingram, and Zion, and it's hard not to get excited about what they might be able to do next season, Max.
Yeah, for sure. They'll be fun to watch. If they need more better guard play overall, probably outside of CJ, but yeah, they're going to be good. I'm excited to see how they develop. Anything else, David? Are you ready for Did You Know?
I am ready, Max.
Alrighty.
The Suns come to the Big Easy and take down this very pesky New Orleans Pelicans team.
Max, did you know the Phoenix Suns have won the last 9 encounters when facing the Dallas Mavericks? That's right. With the second round matchup almost upon us and what feels like the inevitable face-off between Luka Doncic and Deandre Ayton, it only felt right to delve into the history of the Suns and Mavs for Did You Know this episode. Max, November 29, 2019 was the last time Dallas managed to secure a win over the Suns. So, of course, that's where we're going for our first quiz. Can you guess what the starting 5 for the Phoenix Suns was in early 2019, Max?
November 19, 20... Okay, so that would have been Ricky Rubio?
Got it.
Was that when Devin Booker was hurt for a bit, or is Devin Booker playing here?
He's in there. You got 2 from 2.
Okay. Kelly Oubre?
3 from 3.
Was Aaron Baines starting then?
He was 4 from 4.
Who was the 4 then? I don't think Mccollum was starting then. I'm gonna say Mccollum because I can't remember.
It was Dario Saric.
Okay. Yeah.
Very good, though. I wouldn't have got that, I'm going to say. So, a noteworthy admission, as you said from the starters there, Max, was Deandre Ayton, who was, of course, suspended at the time for being caught with a diuretic in his system. So, while the head-to-head record all time for these two franchises over 168 games played is 94-74 in favor of the Suns, the more recent head-to-head since 2008 when Luka and Ayton were drafted is actually 11-3. But of course, neither Ayton or Doncic have appeared in all of those 14 games, Max. So do you want to take a stab at their head-to-head record? I'll give you a clue. It's 9 games total.
9 games. I will say it is 7-2?
It is 8-1
Wow.
to Deandre Ayton. So while that stat is fairly meaningless in the grand scheme of things, we're about to enter into a series that will truly have bragging rights on the line at the end of it. Although Ayton and Luka have never faced off in the playoffs before, the Suns and Mavs certainly have, 12 times, in fact, with the head-to-head record perfectly teetering on 6 wins each and 1 series apiece. Max, 2006, the Mavs got their revenge with a 4-2 win in the Western Conference Finals after losing to the Suns just 1 season prior, which takes us to 2005 and the same round that the two franchises are set to meet in the 2022 campaign here. Max, how well do you think you remember the 2005 Phoenix Suns?
Pretty well. I remember that series pretty well, so I'm interested to see what you ask.
That's great because we aren't going to ask any questions about that team today. Good. Instead, we're going to round things out with a mega Max quiz of weirdness. But before that, I will say, as you remember, 2005 series ended in 6 games with an epic OT thriller where Nash, Marion, and Quentin Richardson all played over 50 minutes. Amari and Jim Jackson both fouled out, and the Suns still only managed to play 3 bench guys for a total of 35 minutes. And there was 34 points scored in the 5-minute overtime period as well, Max.
Jesus Christ.
Are you ready to finish this episode's Did You Know with a truly ridiculous bunch of questions?
I'm ready as ever will be, David.
So with Ayton and Luka in the 2018 draft class, that means the last game between these two teams before they were in the NBA was actually on the last day of the regular season on Tuesday, April 10, 2018. First question. Do you remember this game and which random Suns player top scored in the win, Max?
So there's 2 of these. I think they were back-to-back like that. There's Alec Peters had one. That might be this one. I'm not sure. And then the other one was Jamal Crawford had a crazy game.
Yes. So as you remember, Jamal Crawford was in Deandre Ayton's first season with Igor as the coach. So you hit the nail on the head with your first guess. It was Alec Peters with a career-high 36 points. But let's get even weirder, Max. There were 2 Suns and 3 Mavericks on those rosters that will be in uniform for their respective franchises in this upcoming series. Can you name them?
2 Suns. So Devin Booker would obviously be one of them.
Yep, and it's a bit of a trick question for the second. He featured last episode, actually, Max.
He featured last Oh, you said... you said it was some of the It's a coach, right?
No, he's a player for the Suns.
Oh, he's a player for the Suns, and he was on the team then and now? Oh, man. I don't know, David. Who is it?
Elfrid Payton.
Oh, yeah. How can I forget that?
3 Mavs. Do you want to take a... I was surprised by this, to be honest, because there's been a lot of turnover on their roster, but there's 3 guys.
Dwight Powell?
Is 1.
Dorian Finney-Smith?
Is 2.
Maxi Klieber?
Is 3. That is amazing. Okay. But the weirdness doesn't end there, Max. Can you name the 3 rostered Suns in that game that are now a coach, a player, and a 10-day signing this season for the current Mavs?
Oh, God. No, I can't.
The coach is a Suns favorite. You may be forgetting that he's a coach now. I certainly did until I saw him on the TV the other day.
I'm definitely forgetting that he's a coach.
Jared Dudley is an assistant coach.
Oh, yeah, I had no idea.
Mavs. The player is Marquise Chris, who we may or may not see in this series. And Brandon Knight signed 2 10-day contracts with the Mavs, but won't be on the roster for this series. Okay, final test, Max, and thanks for being such a good sport with my stupidness, as always. Have you seen the TNT crew play Who He Play For with Shaq and Chuck before?
I have seen that, and I'm terrified of where this is going.
All right, these two 2017-18 rosters are littered with a random assortment of guys who are still in the league, believe it or not. So we're going to see how many you can pick their team from this season. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
A few easy ones to start. TJ Warren.
His answer is kind of nobody, but it's Indiana Pacers.
Harrison Barnes.
Sacramento Kings, David.
Seth Curry.
He was on the Sixers, and now he's on the Nets.
3 from 3. A little harder now. Doug McDermott.
Spurs.
Nerlens Noel.
Ooh, Knicks still, right?
Wes Matthews.
Bucks.
Daniel House.
He was the only guy playing defense on the perimeter for the Jazz.
You are running at 100% so far. This one I tripped myself up with. Alex Len.
Oh, Alex Len. Where did he... Sacramento?
That's where I tripped myself up. Your first incorrect one. Washington Wizards he played for this season.
Okay.
Now the real tricky ones. Devon Reed.
Devon Reed. Oh, wasn't he like in and out of a team? Was it the Bucks?
It was the Nuggets.
Okay.
Shaq Harrison.
Oh man. I have no idea.
Brooklyn Nets.
Okay.
Dennis Smith Jr.
If you would have I would have bet a lot of money he's not in the league. God, I have no idea.
You just got to pick tanking teams at this point. Portland Trailblazers is where he ended up. And the funniest one of all, which again, I got shocked when I saw him on the TV towards the end of the regular season. This guy played 12 games for a team at the end. Josh Jackson.
Oh, Sacramento, right? He was killing us in that game.
Yep, exactly. All right, you finished with a win and a pretty good record there overall. But whether you believe Bob Valgaris or not on this week's Bill Simmons podcast, Dennis Smith was nearly traded for Mikal Bridges at some point in their early careers. So I thought that was an easy way to round out the episode. But that's it, mate. All I hope is the Suns end this series much like those 2005 Suns did, and therefore go on to at least one up in the playoffs record in the head-to-head versus Dallas. So let's talk some more now about how they can get it done, shall we?
Let's do it. That was fun. And yeah, the Bob Valgaris thing was terrifying a little bit. He was definitely, he's in a position to know, right? He would know. And Ryan McDonough's dumb enough, so can't rule it out.
Phoenix won tonight. You ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. It's going to be a fun series, man.
We'll see you then.
The Suns and the Mavs in the second round.
All right, we're going to start talking the Mavs with the most obvious question. It's the question everyone's asking. It's the question every team that plays against the Mavericks asks themselves. How do we guard Mr. Luka Doncic? David, I'm going to quickly go over his stats for the regular season playoffs and then turn it to you to dive into your matchup goodness.
Yeah, and I might just throw in the games from this season as well after you do that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Because I think it's noteworthy given who we're about to talk about also, Max.
So regular season, he's 28.4 points, 9.1 rebounds, 8.7 assists, 3.5 turnovers on 45.7 field goal, 35.3 and 74.4 free throw, and that was after starting really poorly. Mm-hmm. He was sensational after that. Playoffs, limited time like Booker, but 3 games, 29 points per game, 10.7 rebounds per game, 5.7 assists, 4.0 turnovers on 47, 36.7, and 80. David, give me the matchup stats, and then your sort of your initial take on how we defend them.
Yeah, I thought it was just worth mentioning this because the Suns were 3-0 this season, so you look at that and go, oh, this is going to be a breeze. But for game 1, 105-98, no Luka or Maxi Klieber. Game 2, 112-104, no Luka or Maxi Klieber. In game 3, 109-101, Luka did play, but Deandre Ayton didn't. So all this stuff that we're going to talk about in how you guard him, there's basically no film, at least from this season, that you can go back and look at and get an accurate representation about what either team is going to do against one another. So throw all of that out, and I think you really have to dig back into the recesses of our memory of what they've done overall through Luka and Deandre Ayton's career, which I think is really, really interesting and a great point to kind of set all of this up, Max.
All right. Well, why don't you dive into that a little bit?
Well, I just think it's worth noting, career versus the Suns versus his career overall. He's 25.8 points per game, whereas his overall career, he's about half of a point more than that. Not a huge difference. 7.6 rebounds to 8.5. He only averages 6.5 assists to 8 for his career overall. He's 46 from the field in both Suns and overall. He's 25% from 3, where he's a 34% shooter overall. And another big one, free throws, 9.8 against the Suns, where he averages 7.6. So you look at that, and straight away, I think it's fair to suggest, over his career, the Suns have limited the assists and kept the three-point percentage way down, and they have upped his free throw attempts, which I think is really, really interesting when you start to dig into what they're going to do here, Max.
Yeah, and in fact, I might even go as far as say it's a little bit concerning, especially when it comes to the three-point shooting. Because, as much as I think the Suns are probably, they're definitely better at defending the three than most teams are. Like, some of that's just going to be small sample size. And, because, especially when it comes to Luka, because Luka's three-point shots are often 30-foot setbacks that are just, are they going to go in or not?
Exactly.
So it does seem like maybe some possible concerning regression there.
Yeah, for sure. But I do think that they do some things stylistically and kind of structure-wise, which I'm happy to kind of dive into right away now if you want to, Max.
Yeah, well, I think the key, you're obviously going to get into this, but I think one of the big keys is they have Mikal Bridges on their team, and most teams don't, and that's somebody that you can really bother a player like Luka with.
Yeah, and I think, you'll see a lot of throwing around of matchup data throughout the series. I think it happened quite a lot in the Pelicans. That can be quite noisy sometimes, particularly with a guy like Luka and the way that the Suns guard him, because a lot of the time when he takes his shot, Mikal Bridges won't necessarily be on him, so that won't get logged in the matchup data. But that doesn't mean that Mikal Bridges isn't doing a lot before the shot to kind of funnel him where the Suns want to see him take his shots and kind of who they want to throw him in towards. So, let's just go right off the top. What do they typically do? So Luka, this regular season, was second in pick and roll frequency behind only Trae Young. In the playoffs so far, he's third behind only Ja Morant and Chris Paul, actually, which was a surprise, which I guess is because Devin Booker missed, because during the regular season, Chris Paul was much lower down the pick and roll frequency. So we've kind of gone back to vintage Clippers Chris Paul for a moment in time before Booker came back. But the Suns basically throw Mccollum and Deandre Ayton at him. And if we break down a typical pick and roll defense here, something they've always done, which I've noticed, is Mccollum jumps the screen to the left. So if you, imagine with me here, listeners, as we go through it, Luka's got the ball at the top of the key. They're running high pick and roll in the middle of the floor. When the screen comes over, Mccollum kind of jumps his butt into the screener to basically ensure that Luka can't go left, because he loves that step back from the left, kind of going left, I guess, is the way. So that takes that out of the equation, and it actually funnels him right into Ayton, who's in, a bit of a drop, but it's a pretty aggressive drop where he's up near the 3-point line. The thing that's really interesting about that, I've talked about this a lot with you and other people online, Ayton is a better defender and blocks a lot more shots with his left hand. So it actually feeds Luka into where Ayton is more comfortable guarding a driver as well. And then they'll throw in a bit of full court pressure, like we saw with Chris Paul. So they'll disrupt Luka a little bit early, make him use a lot of dribbles, maybe even make him give the ball up to some other people before taking the ball back in, positions that he'd prefer not to be in. And they're happy to switch with Ayton too, just straight out, as I mentioned at the top there. So, he'll try and hunt guys, and he'll try and pick Chris Paul and Devin Booker out. But as we know, the Suns do that great job with kind of scram switching on the back line there, where they'll try and, keep Bridges and Ayton on him as much as possible. Do you think we'll see Jay? I think we'll see Jay a bit on him as well. I think they'll throw a few different looks at him, not just Mikal Bridges. What do you think, Max?
Totally agree. I think you have to. I mean, it's just it's too much of a load to have one guy guard that freaking guy. Because the thing people don't understand about Luke, I mean, anybody who's like an avid NBA fan does, but people who are a little more casual, is just how damn strong and huge he is.
Oh.
Especially for Mccollum. I mean, Mccollum, that's maybe his only weakness as a defender is he is somewhat slight of frame. And Luka is going to be able to push him around a little bit. Now, I don't think it's going to be a lot because it's not like Mikkel's a pushover in that way, but it's definitely the way that I think Luka has his best chance of attacking Mccollum.
Yeah, for sure. His length comes into play late, but you can definitely get into Mikkel's body a bit. And yeah, Luka, he's 6'8" and massive, and massive.
Big boy.
Massive in a good way towards the end of the season, whereas he's kind of massive in a bad way when the regular season starts. But that's what he's going to do. He's going to try and get Mccollum on his hip a fair bit. But as I said, when you've got Deandre Ayton there as the guy shading over, and they don't have great options as lob threats at the moment, the team, and we're going to get into it, is certainly a lot better than it has been in past matchups against the Suns, and that's why I'm saying that we should approach it with a little bit of caution, which, as you said at the top as well, there's some small sample size variance there too. So I'm definitely not understating the challenge that this is going to be, but I do think that the Suns are best placed than anyone to be able to kind of attack this pick and roll, which is going to be the majority of the Dallas offense here, although he'll try and do some other things as well, Max.
Yeah, no, very much agree with you. When I was thinking about this, there were two things that stood out to me as strategies I think we need to take against Luka.
Yep.
The first one is to play him as straight up as possible.
Yep.
And to force him to be primarily a scorer.
Yes.
Because you're not going to stop his scoring anyway. I mean, you can force him into tough shots, but he makes tough shots. And if he's making those 30-foot step backs, then there's nothing you can do about it, and you just let it happen.
Mm-hmm.
But the key is just to stay in the three-point shooters and not let him do what we've been doing his whole career, apparently, and that's keeping his assists down. Because, you look at this team, and they were fifth in the percentage of shots taken from three in the regular season, and the playoffs were number one by far because they played Utah, obviously.
Yep.
But I think they took like 53% of the shots from three in the playoffs against Utah. And you just can't have what Utah had. You can't have Dorian Finney-Smith, Reggie Bullock, and Maxi Klieber bombing 7.2, 7.0, and 5.3 threes a game at 40, 41, and 52%. It just can't happen. You're going to lose if you let that happen.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you need to do everything you possibly can to stay home on all those shooters, make it difficult for Luka to find those open players. And if he's going to score 40 points against you, okay, you can survive that as long as the rest of the team is not bombing away.
And we've seen that. He's had big games against the Suns in the past, and they've still got the win. I think anecdotally, you've hit the nail on the head. I think in the past with previous Mavericks lineups that haven't been great and don't utilize Luka's skills as much as what this current team does, we've got a little bit lucky where some of those teammates have just bricked open threes that he's generated. And I love your point there because I had it written down in big bold text. Try guard him 2 versus 2 as much as possible and stay home with everyone else, I think is really, really key in this series. What else did you want to dig into on this, Max?
Yeah, so the other one is I think, sometimes the best defense is good offense. I think while Luka is an improved defender, he's not someone you're really terrified of as a defender.
Yep.
And I think attacking him, not only does it make some sense in terms of just trying to generate good offense, but more importantly, I think you do it to wear him down over the course of the game. He has shown, I think the biggest flaw, I think, of him as a NBA superstar to this point in his career, is I think his offense can get a little predictable at the end of games, especially when he's trying to take over by himself. And I think we want to have him worn out as much as possible at that point, having him force it even when he's tired. And just and even if it's not just the end of the game, but just over the course of the series as well. Like the more we can wear him down, the more we can make his giant offensive load also be a giant offensive and defensive load.
Yep.
I think the better chance we have to win.
I love this. I had it written down, who does he guard and how can they exploit or tire him? We didn't touch on it at the top with the Pelicans stuff. I thought in games 5 and 6, the Suns really started to go at Brandon Ingram.
Yep.
And that's defense. As you said, you can't, a job like Mccollum to actually guard Brandon Ingram or Luka Doncic possession after possession is not easy. The more weapons you can throw at it, and one of them is how much you can make him work on the other end, so he is tired towards the end. That's how a defender like Mikal Bridges can really get on top towards the end of a game. They caught Brandon sleeping a lot on Mikal, particularly in that big game 5 that Mikal had. I think a lot of it was mistakes from Brandon Ingram and attacking him. Interestingly, as I said, I threw this season out, but I went back to the season prior, and it kind of really touches on the two main things we've discussed here matchup-wise. In 2020-21, Mikal was the number 1 in the league for time defended on Luka Doncic, 108.5 possessions. As I said, matchup data, a little bit noisy, but Luka was 10 of 21, had 7 assists and 4 turnovers on those possessions. So if you're thinking that anyone but Mikal Bridges is going to guard Luka for the majority of the time in this series, I would think again. I think that points that is definitely the answer. But the other side of the ball, he guarded Mikal and Jay almost equal amounts. So that kind of says to me that he tries to, I guess, switch between those two guys based on what the offense is doing to not be in as much action as possible. And the great thing about that with the offense that I cover at length and that we talk about all the time is the Suns have weapons and kind of levers they can pull, I guess, within the offense to make sure that whoever Luka is on is running through action. And I know it's probably a little bit scary to think about putting Jay Crowder through more offensive action just to tire Luka Doncic out, but they can just do little things like they're 2 up, where the big horns, the 2 bigs come up to screen Chris Paul or campaign at the top, and Luka has to be one of those guys. Or the elbow stuff where Jay Crowder runs off a screen and Luka has to fight through that. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that Jay Crowder's taking 15 shots a game. You can still run Luka through stuff that just tires him out, having to, force through screens, make decisions, think on his feet. All that kind of stuff counts, I think, as defense at the end of the day, Max.
Yeah, totally. And obviously, you're also just trying to get him switched on to Booker and Chris Paul as much as you possibly can.
Yes,
and
please.
Have him defend in space, because that's the most thing. And, again, he's not a bad defender necessarily. There will be times where he does an adequate job in those situations, but the key is just to do it to him over and over and over again. So he gets really, really tired. The other thing... yeah, go ahead.
Just because you mentioned him, can we just touch before I forget? Booker loves this matchup,
yes.
And I think he hates the attention that Luka has gotten since... I don't think it's a Deandre Ayton Luka thing. I just think it's I'm better than this guy, and I've proven to be a winner, and he gets all the national attention, and I just don't think he likes it, and I think he really thrives off it in this matchup. So if you do see Devin Booker switched onto him, he's going to take him, and he's going to try and make him look bad, because I think he revels in that challenge, Max.
Yeah, there's no doubt. I mean, Luka. So one of the things that happened to Devin Booker in his career is because he was saddled with such a bad team, is he never really got like this is the breakout guy moment where ESPN like salivates over somebody for however many months straight. And I mean, in Booker's time in the league, no player has gotten that treatment more than Luka Doncic. So I think you're absolutely right about that he's going to want to prove a point in this series. He's going to want to outduel Luka Doncic. Hopefully not to the detriment of the team. Hopefully he doesn't try to attack him too much. But again,
yes.
I'm not sure it's possible to attack him too much in this series. I'm going to be okay with it. Even when there are missed shots, it doesn't look great. I think the sum total of it in the aggregate at the end of the series will be worth it.
Process over results, Max.
100% all the time. Something else I had written down. I wonder if Torrey Craig gets back in this series a little bit because of the Luka matchup.
For sure.
It might be useful for that. And then the other thing too is teams are doing this to us all the time. I wonder if we try to maybe pick up Luka a little more full court just to bother him, just again to keep wearing him down, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mentioned that up the top. I think some of the games that I've gone back and done threads on, that's a key consistent thing. But consistent that they do it a lot, but very randomly. Mikal will just pick random possessions after a bucket where he decides to instead of running back on defense, stay full court and pressure Luka. And that's the real key with a guy like Luka, much the same as Chris Paul, is throw him different looks all the time so he doesn't get used to anything. And I think that's where, even though Mikal's going to be the primary guy, you'll see Jay Crowder. I love the Torrey Craig shout. I'm sure they'll give him some minutes on him as well to try and keep Bridges as fresh as possible. They're going to throw multiple guys at him here. So, yeah, I think we've pretty much covered the nuts and bolts of what you do against Luka Doncic. But as we alluded to before, I think this Mavs team overall is much better than teams we've faced in the past, and now might be a good time to delve a little bit further into that, Max.
Absolutely. Well, I think the biggest reason for that is Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
Who has emerged in these playoffs in this season as a borderline all-star player, and he's probably there if he keeps playing this way. He had 28 points per game, 5 rebounds a game, 4 assists a game, only 0.7 turnovers on 48, 36, and 86 against Utah. Now, a lot of that is because it was against Utah. I think this is where the fact that Devin Booker is a better perimeter defender than anyone on Utah's roster really shows up. I think he's a very nice matchup on Jalen Brunson, actually, if he's healthy.
Okay.
He's got the size to guard. Jalen Brunson's a big boy, kind of like Luka, like a smaller version of Luka almost.
Yep.
Not tall, but big. And I think Devin Booker's got the size where he can bother Jalen Brunson. He's got the quickness to stay with him. I think also Chris Paul will relish this matchup a little bit because even though he doesn't have the height, he has sort of like the post savvy and the strength to go up against Jalen Brunson.
Yep.
I think we're a much better equipped team to guard him than the Jazz were. But all that said, we just spent quite a bit of time talking about how much we have to focus on Luka. If the focus is on Luka, Jalen Brunson has a real opportunity to do some damage.
And this is the guy that the Mavs have been missing in the past. And that if I was a Mavs fan, I'd be pulling my hair out of wasting the first few years, because anybody who watched Luka before he came to the NBA, which the Mavs loved to gloat that they were on him before anyone else in the world was, they should have realized far sooner than now that putting another playmaker out with Luka is the best way that you optimize him out on the floor. And I think the Suns typically kind of struggle with a guy like Jalen Brunson. I agree with you that they've got much better guys to throw at him than Utah did, and therefore his stats might be a little bit inflated from that series. But just thinking that kind of low to the ground, shifty point guard, Chris Paul doesn't love taking that, on a night to night basis, and we saw him kind of make Rudy Gobert look pretty silly in some of those matchups. So it's going to be definitely a real pivotal part of it. To kind of set things up here for the series, talking about Jalen Brunson, a few questions for you, Max, if you're game.
Sure. Yeah, let's go.
Assuming Book isn't 100%, do you think it's fair to suggest that Luka's the best player in the series?
Yeah, in fact, you cover your earmuffs, any Super Homer Suns fans. I think it's pretty fair to say he's the best player in the series regardless.
Yeah, I put that little caveat in there to save us a little bit. But yeah, I agree with you. We may as well be totally truthful about that. As you've said, I think it's also fair to suggest that Brunson is the Mavs' second best guy, correct?
No doubt.
How many Suns do you name between Luka and Jalen Brunson?
That's a really interesting question. So obviously, Booker, if you have him 1 or 2, whatever, but he's above Brunson. Chris Paul. The fact that I'm even pausing here shows you how damn good this guy is.
Yeah.
But I think Ayton and Mccollum are the other guys that you could argue, and I think they're all pretty close. But I think that's all you could say.
I agree with you. I think it's Luka, then 4 Suns, and then Jalen Brunson right now.
Yeah, and Brunson's right there, man. He's right there.
Oh, 100%. And I just think that that's a great way to look at this series, because it's going to be your classic, do you go with the best guy in the series and the best player, or do you go at the full supporting cast? And I think a lot of people, you'll see it. I think you mentioned this to me privately. You're going to see a lot of people pick the Mavs as the sexy pick here, and most of them will say, oh, you know what, at the end of the day, I think Luka's the best player in the series, and I'm going to go with that. But I think this is going to be a real test of that theory, because I think the Suns' almost entire starting 5 outside of Jay Crowder can be jammed in the middle there before you get to the Mavs' second best guy. And then it's an even bigger gulf potentially when you start talking about the third best guy on the team. But I guess to do that, let's talk matchups. You've touched on it quite a bit here. I think you're right, Devin Booker on Jalen Brunson. We've said Mikhail's going to have Luka. DA starting on Dwight Powell is probably the easy one. What do you think? CP3 on Reggie Bullock and Jay Crowder on Dorian Finney-Smith. Is that kind of how you see things to start with, Max?
Yeah, I think so. And it almost doesn't matter, those last 2. They're kind of interchangeable offensively to some extent.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, no, I think that's probably right. It's going to be really interesting. I mean, I think we just spent a lot of time talking about the strengths of Dallas. I think there's also quite a few weaknesses to their roster.
Yeah.
That I think that would be helpful. I think so. One thing that we probably should have said from the start here is that this is not the Pelicans anymore. We are facing a very, 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 very different team in almost every single way.
Yeah.
They're a much better defensive team than the Pelicans are. Although the Pelicans, I think, got a lot better and pretty good in the playoffs actually. They are slow as dirt, this team. They're the slowest team in the league.
Yeah.
They really take care of the ball like we do. Like, they take care of the ball like crazy. I mentioned Brunson earlier, 0.7 turnovers last series.
It's crazy.
Is nuts considering his load. They don't offensive rebound, which is that'll be a relief for everybody.
Yeah. Throw that one out. We don't have to worry about that one.
They don't get to the line, aside from Luka, which is a big aside, but they don't get to the line, which obviously Nola was punishing us there. So there's a lot of things here that I think are helpful. I think that the key here is going to be shut down the threes, as we got into earlier. But a lot of the things that they were exploiting, or that the Pelicans were exploiting, not going to be an issue here, and it's going to be I think it'll hopefully be a less frustrating series to watch.
Yeah, I think that's a good thing to touch on. Steve Jones Jr. on the Dunker Spot podcast, which I love to listen to for my kind of general NBA analysis, always hits on this. Mm-hmm. You know, from series to series, things can change completely. Things that were working for you aren't going to work for you from game one in the next series, and all of a sudden you go, oh shit, like, we need to find another thing. And then things that were being exploited, which you've touched on right here. This is a perfect example. You know, free throws and offensive rebounds were the things that kept the Pelicans in the last series. They're just not going to be a concern. You're not going to see the Mavs go double big and attack the offensive glass. I can be very confident of that. Yep. You're not going to see big physical games where the free throws become an issue outside of obviously Luka Doncic, as you said, which that might get a little bit ridiculous. As I said, 9.8 free throw attempts per game versus the Suns. So we're going to see a lot of charity stripe played. You know, be prepared for that. But, you know, I think that's a great, you know, example of things changing from series to series. This is going to be completely different series to the one that we've just watched. Not to suggest that it's going to be easier, because I don't think it is, and we'll get to that in terms of predictions later like we always do, but it's going to be a very, very different series with what's the best way to put less randomness, I would say, you know, because they don't have the shot making of the Pels. I think you're going to just feel more comfortable in what you're seeing from game to game, but then it just becomes a execution thing. Can you stop them, and can you make sure that they don't stop us as much as possible? So yeah, very different series, but doesn't mean that it's going to be any easier, Max.
Yeah, the only randomness thing you may fall into a little bit is if they have like a 17 for 33 3-point game or something like that.
Yeah,
which will probably happen.
I'm sure they will. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and it'll come across. And we'll probably lose that game unless we're crazy offensively too. So that will happen at some point and will be annoying. But you're right. It's not going to be. It's going to be so much more aesthetically pleasing than the Pelicans series in like every single way.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but probably my least favorite thing as a basketball fan watching my own team is just to give up offensive rebounds constantly, and that's not going to happen. Thank God. The thing that I think is really interesting, David, the Spencer Dinwiddie factor is really interesting because he was awful against Utah, and he was awful for Washington before he went to Dallas, where he was better. To put in perspective, last round he was 36 from the field, 29 from 3, 73 from the line. Really bad.
Yeah.
He doesn't strike terror into you as a player like Luka or Brunson, but he's flirted with being all-star level player before, and he's capable of having a big series. He's sort of a guy to watch here.
Yeah, I've got it down as my main concern. In terms of not Dinwiddie specifically, but my concern here is coaching again. And basically, one thing that might be similar to the Pelicans series, Kidd only has a very small handful of guys to choose from.
Yep.
You know, on that bench, you've got Maxi Klieber, Spencer Dinwiddie, Davis Bertans. Then you get down into the dregs of, you know, Trey Burke, Australian guy Josh Green, who played a lot of minutes in their first round series, whereas Monty has, you know, a really deep bench to choose from. But that doesn't always work out in the playoffs. You know, you having 2 or 3 guys off the bench that play really well can quite often be better than, as we saw in the Pelicans series, a whole bunch of bench players that aren't playing well for the Phoenix Suns. So, you know, Monty's too much choice versus Kidd just having those guys and whether those guys can step up, because, you know, I think that our supporting cast overall is much, much better. And we'll get into this at the end in terms of comparing it to this time last season. But I think there's a lot of similarities to the corresponding season that we went into last time. But yeah, Dinwiddie's the one off the bench. They need him to keep struggling to not, I guess, create another thing to worry about in this Mavs lineup, Max.
Yeah, this could turn into Spencer Dinwiddie and campaign just bricking layups one after another. That'd be fun. No, I agree with you. I think it's really important to keep Dinwiddie as a problem for the Mavericks more than a boon.
Yeah,
I think that's going to be something that we need to be an advantage in this series. That's really important. It's just going to be really fascinating to see how they. I agree with you. I think the fact that Kidd has it's either Kidd or his defensive coordinator or somebody has just done such a good job coaching in these players. I think we're going to see some really interesting things out of them, particularly defensively guarding us, which is a side of the ball we haven't talked about as much because it's not. I don't think it's important to how the series goes. Is how they defend us. I think we're going to kind of get ours to some extent anyway.
Yep.
But the more they're able to frustrate us by doing things that we don't really see coming, the more they can keep this series more manageable for them and allow Luka's offense to win the day for them. So
yeah,
really interested to see how that plays out.
I had 3 guys' names written down. So and 2 of them are very I guess apt for your point just now. So Dorian Finney-Smith and Reggie Bullock, they're their kind of defensive bulldogs in the starting lineup. 13 points per game and 11 points per game in round 1, respectively. They both shot 40% from 3, as you mentioned, I think early on in the segment. They were very, very good from deep against the Utah Jazz. Last thing, Finney-Smith, 43.3 minutes per game in round 1. Reggie Bullock, 42.4 minutes per game. So they're coming into this series off the back of even more minutes than Mikal Bridges, which is hard to imagine. So again, coming into the not a lot of choice kind of debate, those guys, they have to play. They clearly need them. I think Bullock will probably take CP3 to start with, and as we've seen in the past, Dorian Finney-Smith will probably be matched up on Devin Booker, and that means we get into that same Mccollum conversation. He's going to have Jalen Brunson on him, trying to hide, and he's got to take advantage of that. Yep. Jay's going to have Luka on him. We already touched on what they can do to try and stretch that, and then Ayton's going to have to deal with Dwight Powell. And the third guy that I had written down, the only other one that I'm really interested in as a swing piece, Maxi Klieber.
Yes, yep.
Comes off the bench, but plays more minutes than Powell, so he's kind of like that fake starter. And if he stays hot from 3, I think he shot 50%, 51% against the Jazz. I think it could hurt both Deandre Ayton and like a guy like JaVale McGee if he gets minutes, just kind of stretching this team out a little bit. So he's another one that the Suns are definitely going to have to watch, Max.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if JaVale McGee even plays in this series, especially after the first couple games.
Yep.
Because, again, the Mavs, what they want to do is they want to shoot threes, and they have bigs who can shoot threes. Aside from Dwight Powell, they're big shoot, and that's going to be something where if JaVale can't get out and those guys are stay out and those guys, it's going to be a problem. And it might have to be, again, like a guy like Torrey Craig might have to play a little more.
I love you mentioned him earlier because I think you've hit the nail on the head. Lots of Torrey Craig instead of the bigs in this one for sure.
Yeah, hope he plays a little better offensively, but yeah, we might have to rely on him a little bit. That's one thing that I think is really worth. I mean, we got into this a little bit before, but I think it's worth pointing out again is the difference between what Jonas Valanciunas and Larry Nance, those guys were doing, and what this team will be doing, because they're going to be pulling our guys out and shooting threes, and it's going to be a lot more pace and space sort of for the ball with them. Oh, not really pace, just space, because the pace is very slow. But yeah, they're not attacking the boards, and that'll be good. And the last thing I want to touch on in this part of it is the Dorian Finney-Smith Booker thing. And you alluded to this earlier in the podcast, where it's going to be really important that Booker is at full strength or near full strength.
Yep.
Because Booker is one of the guys. Dorian Finney-Smith, by the way, an amazing defender who can shut down most players in the league. I believe historically Booker's done a pretty good job against him.
Yes.
But if he's not 100%, that becomes that much harder, right? If game 1 we're watching and Dorian Finney-Smith is shutting down Booker because Booker's just not where he needs to be health-wise, that's going to change the entire series and make it way harder to score. And then at that point, it does become the series more about how do the Suns generate offense more so than defend Luka.
And as an extension of that, I think Chris Paul is going to be pretty good against Reggie Bullock, even though he does pretty well against smaller guards. So if Booker's not giving the Mavs fits, then if they can switch Dorian Finney-Smith onto Chris Paul and have Bullock or somebody else guard Devin Booker, I think that's advantage Mavs as well, because anytime you can get size and length onto Chris Paul, I think we've seen in the last couple of years that can really disrupt things. So that's going to be really interesting just to see how Book bounces out of the gates in this one. But My only other observation going through this, Max, is just how it feels like deja vu and similarities to the Denver series. You and I joked about it as we set up the structure of this podcast, that we could basically just go back and copy last season's format for this pod. We're going into round 2 after 4-2 wins in round 1. As you'll remember, we beat the Lakers 4-2 in round 1 and went into it. I think, there's a lot of similarities between Luka Doncic and Nikola Jokic. I'm pretty sure the episode last year, we dived straight into how do we guard Nikola Jokic, because that was the clear way to start digging into the series, as we did here with Mavs and Luka up the top. And I alluded to it before, that the supporting cast is kind of much better for the Mavs than it's been in the past, but I think there's a lot of similarities as you get into the 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th guys to that Nuggets series last year. And as we saw, we ended up sweeping them. I'm not saying we're going to sweep the Mavs here by any stretch, but I think if you can attack early 1 or 2, guys on this Mavs lineup, and make them start thinking about what their plan B and C and contingencies are, I think you get into a similar place as you did with the Nuggets last year, where the coach looks down the bench and he just doesn't have options. So he's just got to ride with guys. And, we saw it with, Michael Porter Jr., for instance, on defense last year, where the Suns were able to just exploit that over and over because they didn't have anything else to go to. So whilst I'm concerned that there's that, too much choice over a small forced rotation, do think that if the Suns can land some early body blows, it's going to put the Mavs in kind of more trouble than they're expecting early on, Max.
Yeah, I agree with you. There are definitely some similarities. Like there is a chance this series turns into a kind of an avalanche of the Suns just out-talenting the Mavericks all over the place and all over the court. Yeah. I think there's less of a chance of that than there was in the Denver series, primarily because we just had such a good matchup against them because of the way Ayton could have guarded Jokic.
Exactly.
And I expect Mccollum to be very, very good against Luka. Don't get me wrong, but to some extent, it's just different. A big wing player is harder to shut down than a big in the playoffs, especially. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to show up. I do, and also the Brunson factor is a factor too, because the Nuggets didn't have anybody like Brunson last year.
They did not.
No. So that's going to be concerning. We'll see how he plays in the series. But I just want to point out a couple of small differences. Overall, I totally agree with the way you're looking at it and the way this is kind of mirroring the last round. It very much is. And again, I really enjoyed that series, David. So I hope this series plays out similarly to that series.
Yeah, I wouldn't say no to a sweep after the round 1 that we just had to have there, Max. But yeah, go for it. Last thing.
Yeah, last. So that was your last thing, or do you have another last thing?
I'm all out, okay. And we're right on 90 minutes as we always are. So go for it.
We are perfect. Max. Yeah. So I have my last kind of main thing I want to get into, and that's just kind of the way I view this series. I think it's just kind of all about execution. And a lot of series are like that, but this one especially because both teams are so methodical, and I think the pace will be relatively slow. I think in order for the Mavericks to win this series, Luka's just going to have to really out-execute Paul and Booker at the end of games, because I think the Suns are just more talented. And, assuming they can get to the end of the games close, I think it's going to really come down to whether Luka can be better than Paul and Booker. Mm-hmm. And so, like, as I said before, I think the key here is just attack him, make him carry the whole scoring load, like closing out the shooters. Just generally make it as hard as you possibly can on Luka Doncic, because the reason why we said his name so much, this team lives and dies by him, and that's just, to me, that's the key.
Yeah, 2 things to touch on, I guess, at the end there. That feeds perfectly into your point of where the differences are with the Nuggets series, because Ayton kind of gave Jokic everything he could handle on the other end in that series, which, as we went over meticulously before, that's a big part of playing defense against these big guys, is making them work at the other end. So just doubling down on that point with Luka, there's not the same obvious matchup as there was against Ayton against Jokic, but they need to find the matchups to make Luka work. And the bench, you're right, it's all going to come down to execution. And the bench didn't execute in round 1, so we really need to see them bounce back, and for Monty to pick the right guys that he can trust out there, because it might be one of those series where the starters play each other at a relatively even pace, and it could just be those 5-minute bench spurts that swing a game or 2, Max.
Yeah, totally agree. All right, we ready for 7 seconds or less before we get to our prediction?
I am totally ready, Max.
With the first pick in the 2018 NBA Draft, the Phoenix Suns select Deandre Ayton from Nassau, Bahamas, and the University of Arizona.
All right. I'm going to skip the thing. Everyone knows how it goes. Do you want to go first or you want to go first?
I'll go first, Max. You can have Luka Doncic on a max contract and $20 million to spend, or DeAndre Ayton on a max and Mikal Bridges on his current, already looking like a bargain extension. Which do you choose?
I feel like your entire goal here is just to get me in trouble on these podcasts. I really do sometimes. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Suns fans. It's Luka. He is the chance. I'm not saying he'll get there. I could be wrong about this, but he has the chance to be a historic player. And as much as I love the other two guys, I just don't see him as a historic player. And the NBA historic players matter the most.
I won't leave you out on an island, and I'll join you. But I will say that I think it's a much more interesting conversation than it has been in the past, where I pause at least a little bit on that one.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and largely because of obviously how good Ayton's been in the playoffs, and then Mccollum is just, oh my God, what a star he's become.
Yep.
Okay, what is more likely to you, that Memphis upsets Golden State, or that someone other than Boston comes out of the East?
I'll just go with the quantity of the East, I think. I haven't loved what Memphis did against the Wolves, even though a lot of people have touched on the fact that was just a bad matchup for them. But I just think the Warriors are gonna handle the Grizz.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll go with the other choice, Max.
Yeah, I'm interested to see how Golden State guards people who can, guards were actually good. But it will be interesting to see. I agree with you on that.
I'll flip my questions here because it kind of comes off that one. Has your Western Conference Finals or Finals predictions changed after seeing a round of the playoffs here, Max?
No, not yet. I still very much think it's Golden State, Phoenix, and I still think Phoenix wins. I think it's going to be a really damn hard series, and I'm terrified for it.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where I'm at.
And Finals, still Boston then?
Yeah. So, I think that solidified pretty easily for me.
Yep.
After this one, I mean, the Middleton. I mean, if Middleton were healthy, this would be an all-time series we're looking at here in the East. But without Middleton, the way that the Celtics play defense, it's going to be really hard for the Celtics or for the Bucks to score, I think.
That's fair.
Similarly, I suppose, which team is your biggest concern in a series at this point? Golden State or Boston? I assume it's one of them.
Yeah, we kind of went over this, I think, last one or the one before. Don't know whether I'm being naive. I still think that the Boston matchup is a good one for the Suns. And I'm definitely more scared of the Warriors. Maybe that's just, historical stuff rather than looking at what's in front of me this season. But yeah, I'm still picking the Warriors, Max.
I'm with you. But Boston, I think it should be a great matchup between two teams. I think it's a fun one.
Oh, for sure.
I think we can win
I'd love that series.
Yeah, I think we can out-execute them at the end of the game. I think we'll win that. But like Golden State, it's just a wild card, man. The way those guys shoot, I don't want to play them.
Just the matchups in that series. Tatum and Booker going head-to-head as scorers. Mikal trying to guard Tatum. Oof. Who do they throw at Booker? Ayton against their kind of versatile bigs, Marcus Smart against Chris Paul, and all the shenanigans there.
God.
I'm absolutely salivating at the thought of us getting there, Max. As scary as it will be if we do, but that would just be an all-timer, I think.
And the symmetry of that being our first finals in the loss. You have quite the did you know for me for that one.
That's very true, very true. All right, we're going back to the 2016 draft with my last question here. I think arguably the best 5 players in draft order are Simmons, Ingram, Jalen Brown, Pascal Siakam, and I'll let you choose one of Jamal Murray, Domantas Sabonis, or DeJounte Murray. What 5 do you pick in a redraft, Max?
Oh, right, in order?
Yeah, I want to see how these guys flip around. Really, after watching Brandon Ingram against us in that series, this question has come out from.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's kind of the thing that's changed the most, right? I would not have had Ingram number 1. I don't think I have him number 1 now.
Yep.
Man, it's so hard with Murray and Simmons because I don't know what the hell's going on with those guys. Siakam is maybe number 2 just because he's going to play basketball.
Yep.
Sorry, who's the other one? I forget the other one. Oh, Jalen Brown.
Yep.
I think Jalen Brown, I guess, would be 3 for me. But Jalen Brown and Pascal Siakam real close.
Yeah.
And then I guess I'll go Murray because this thing is more of an injury concern. And Simmons, I don't have a lot of faith in that guy. He's not showing himself to be. I mean, listen, the mental health thing. I don't know what's going on there. That could be totally a factor. But I've never liked that guy. I think his personality always seems really bad. I think I've told you this before. It goes back to his draft night when he stepped over the cameraman and didn't even help him up, or didn't even, in fact, even check on him to make sure he wasn't hurt. Like, to me, it seems like he's not a good guy. It doesn't seem like his teammates like him, and that concerns me. He also never gets better.
Yep.
I don't know. It's turned into a Simmons hate fest. I know he's Australian. Sorry about that.
Nah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. Ingram 1, Siakam, Brown, interchangeable 2, 3. Jamal Murray, yes, it's an ACL, but a lot of guys come back from those looking just as good as what they have in the past. So I think you'd comfortably go him 4. And yeah, Simmons, I guess, is the other part of this question is sliding down the draft board, even with a guy like DeJounte Murray. I don't think it's out of the question that next year we are talking about, him being better than Ben Simmons, if not already, just by sheer fact of he's playing at the moment. So we'll see.
It doesn't matter to play basketball. It does matter when
I'd pick
play.
you on a draft board over Ben Simmons right now, because who knows if he's ever going to play a game again, Max.
I promise. If you give me a max contract, I will at least be out there. I promise.
And you wouldn't step over a cameraman, so you've got the intangibles on your side.
I hope so, at least. Yes. I forgot about DeJounte Murray. Have him 4th if now, actually.
Yep. Okay.
Now that you bring him up, he was great this year. All right, last one from me. Of the 3 bench players for the Suns who struggled in the series against the Pelicans, Landry Shamet, Cam Payne, and Torrey Craig, who do you have the most faith in turning it around?
Ooh. Process over results. I'm going to go Cam Payne.
Okay.
And it's line ball with Landry, and I think Torrey Craig, as we've touched on, is the X factor because he might just get more of an opportunity to impact this series. But I just think, even though he fouled out in record time in that game, I was really buoyed by how he played in that game, the confidence that he brought, the energy that he brought, the shots that he took. Because, I've touched on this. It's one thing to go cold as a team from 3. It's another thing to ice yourself out by stopping taking those shots. And I've really liked the fact that Cam Payne, other than maybe a small stretch in one of the games where he stopped shooting, hasn't stopped. So I'm going to back that in and kind of tip for a Cam Payne bounce back in this series, Max.
Yeah, history's on your side, obviously. He's shown it in the playoffs before. You hope so. For some reason, I find myself, maybe because I'm a stan, even though Landry Shamet couldn't make a shot in that series, I kind of like the way he looked. He looked better than he looked in the regular season most of the time to me. He seemed confident. It's just, the line ball stuff is tough. He's got to get some arc on that shot. But, man, if he does, he was really providing some offense we needed in that series.
I'll tell you this, we didn't mention him as an honorable mention, but before I looked at the series stats, and they just weren't good enough to consider him, he was definitely a name just off the eye test that I thought deserved looking at 1 star because we were, as we touched on, really scraping the bottom of the barrel towards the end there.
Yeah, nothing says it more than that he could even be considered at all. That says a lot. Okay, David, it's time. I can't remember who went first last time. Who went first last time?
Ooh, I reckon I did.
Okay, I will go first here. Really tough for me. It's always tough to pick a number of games because you pick how you think the series is going to go, but the number of games can be kind of variable, but depending on things. So I wavered between Suns in 7 and Suns in 5. And I ultimately ended up, despite the fact that I think we have more talent and actually kind of a positive matchup here, I think I'm going to go 7 games here. And it's because of what Luka's done so far in his career, especially against the Clippers in the playoffs. It's so hard to see that guy going down in 5 or losing at home in a game 6. Mm-hmm. I think it will be a relatively, quote unquote, easy 7-game series. I don't think we'll be particularly freaked out. We may even be less freaked out than we were against the Pelicans at times. But I think I can see this being one where it's every team's just winning the home games, and in game 7, it's not that hard. We win, but it's man, damn, Luka had a great series. Wow, that guy's crazy, sort of thing.
Yeah, I love your point on the kind of just picking the games is tough. Because I think, did we both pick Suns in 5 against the Pelicans?
We did. And the Devin Booker injury factored in there.
Yeah, we're 1 game off that, and Devin Booker got injured. So I think process, again, over results was pretty good there. I agree with you. Suns in 7, and I just went real kind of logical on this, I guess. I think there's going to be a Luka game. I think there's going to be a game where everybody else hits their shots when we play really well on Luka. And then I think if you want to throw a 3rd game in, we touched on it before, just that 3-point variance game where they just hit absolutely everything. And even if you play well, you lose on the math equation. So, I just think that looking at it from that kind of angle, they're going to get at least 2 wins, probably 3, and we're going 7.
Yeah, that's the thing. I also forgot to mention, like the Suns, bread their butter on being able to close the end of games, execute other teams, and I mean, in terms of a one guy playoff thing, who you're most scared of at the end of a game, Luka's up there on that list.
Yep.
And so he has the potential to swing a game or two himself pretty easily, and it'll be fun to watch. David, the number one thing about the series, I think a lot of people will say this, but I'm just excited for it. What a fun one.
Yep, I think we've got a good one coming up here, and if we get through an even better one in the Western Conference Finals, and as we just teased, if we make it all the way to the finals, potentially an even better one again. So we're in for some stress, but we're also in for some fun, and I love playoff basketball. I said it even during the Pelicans series. You got to embrace it. It's fun.
Yep.
It doesn't always go your way, but that's the playoffs, and if you're not enjoying yourself watching these games, I just don't think that you love basketball as much as maybe you think you do, Max.
Yep, or you love the Suns too much and can't handle yourself, which is me.
Exactly.
Me sometimes. All right, thanks everybody. Anything to plug in?
No, I mentioned it before. Go watch the Chris Paul video. 6 minutes of your time. Took me a hell of a lot longer, so I'd appreciate it if you haven't watched that. But other than that, I just hope to be back with you again in a couple of weeks' time, Max, after presumably a 7-game series.
Me too, David. Thanks everybody, and go Suns.
And it's hard when you have to compete against someone you love, and so there was tons of emotions with this game. I'm glad we won, but I know what it feels like to be on the other side, and I just felt for Willie, but I was unbelievably elated for our team. So there's just this weird back and forth with my feelings and my heart right now, but I'm just grateful to get this win. It was a really cool win for us.